Episode 308, Droughts, Hydropower and Food. This is The Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. First off, a big thank you to J Love for buying me a coffee through the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website and in the show notes. It was most gratefully received and happily consumed. Now to matters. Varroa Mite Update, 4th of September 2022. Quote, Varroa Mite Emergency Response Daily Update. No new detections. End quote. So that's a thing going well. Now to more pressing matters. From the website Snowbrains comes an article entitled, When You See Me Weep, Hunger Stones Resurfacing in Europe Due to Record Drought. Quote, Reminders of a long-forgotten past are resurfacing all over Europe. The recent record droughts in Europe have brought to the surface old reminders that, while we are experiencing extreme summer with record heat waves and droughts, these extreme events are not unprecedented. In the rivers Elbe and Rhine, which flow across Central Europe to the North Sea, carved stones have resurfaced as the drought has brought the water levels to record lows. These stones are the so-called hunger stones, reminders of drought centuries ago, left as a warning for future generations. End quote. Messages from the past, carved in stone. More of this later. From the RTE website comes an article from the 1st of September entitled Flagstone of Fire Lit on River Sewer in Rare Sighting. Quote, a tradition which goes back generations but is rarely given the opportunity to be fulfilled was followed this evening at the River Sewer. Kenny's Rock is a flat stone lying in the bed of the river in Carrick-on-Suir, which can only be seen when the water is at a sufficiently low level. Low tide this evening was one of those times, and in line with local customs, a fire was lit on the stone when it made its appearance. It is believed that the visibility of the stone this year was the first time in living memory that it has been seen, and was caused by a long, largely dry spell during July and August, which meant low levels of water in the sewer. End quote. These traditions mark past events as well as the current long dry spell in Europe. But wait, there's more. From Bloomberg comes a piece dated the 16th of August 2022 and entitled China Facing Power Supply Threat from Drought in Sichuan. Quote, a heatwave in Sichuan is curbing hydropower generation and a growing threat to electricity supply and economic growth in one of China's most populous provinces. Some factories in the manufacturing hub in southwestern China are curbing production, and the extreme weather may also cut supplies of materials like polysilicon and lithium that are vital to the energy transition. High temperatures and drought are the worst on record, with the heat expected to continue for at least another week, according to the Sichuan Provincial Economic and Information Department. Water flows into hydro reservoirs have dropped by 50% since the start of the month from average historical levels, just as the hot weather boosted power demand, it said on a government website. End quote. And from CNN, also on the 16th of August 2022, the West's historic drought is threatening hydropower at Hoover Dam. By that they mean America's West. Quote, standing atop the Hoover Dam today, the millions of tourists who visit each year can get a real sense of the climate crisis in the West. In addition to extreme heat, the sight of so-called bathtub rings that envelop Lake Mead has become an unsettling reminder of where the water level once was before the region's historic drought began. The changes are stunning to see. Kristen Everest, Senior Climate Advisor for the Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak, told CNN. If people don't think that climate change is impacting them here and now, just go to Lake Mead and have a look around, because that paints a pretty clear picture of what we're up against when it comes to climate change. End quote. So not just Europe, here in the Antipodes, drought is a thing we know all too well. The Millennium Drought, as it's known here, ran from 1997 to 2009, and I well remember when that drought started to break. I was on a community transport bus going to pick up a client from rehab when an old man going to the same hospital, back in 2010 this was, mentioned as the rain tumbled down, the drought wouldn't be over until Warragamba Dam, the main water storage for Sydney, had overflowed. And that didn't happen until the 2nd of March 2012. That's how dry the landscape was, 2.5 years to re-soak the soils. We then swung back to drought from 2017 to 2020. The black summer fires of 2019 and 2020 were the end of that drought, when the dam again overflowed. There's a particular poem school children learn that has the following lines in it. I love a sunburnt country, a land of drought and flooding rains. It goes on, but there you go. So as I say, it's a thing we live with. Years ago, just into the millennium drought, I was watching a TV show on water conservation measures by Australian irrigators. The introduction of drip waterers for horticulture and so on. The changes were impressive, yet the lack of rain saw those irrigation entitlements reduced to zero within years due to drought. Immediately following that program was one on the almond industry in California. Yes, I know, I watch all the really good shows, and the differences were spectacular. From drip-fed individual trees, grapevines and so on in Australia's irrigation areas, to scenes of thousands of acres of almond trees being flood irrigated. Now, we know from history that the salt marshes of southern Iraq are the result of too many flood irrigation events. A little salt is left behind every year through evaporation before the water percolates into the soil, and eventually the soil becomes so salty that nothing will grow. That aside, the huge waste of water in a climate as dry as ours was almost incomprehensible. And the differences between the two systems was, of course, the price of the irrigation water. Almost free to the almond growers, who therefore wasted a lot of it, and considerably more expensive on this white brown land, where it was more carefully harnessed. So if we look about, we see things are in flux. From Europe across Asia to the US, things are drier. Sometimes drier than they have been for the last half millennium. And with the third La Nina reported back in episode 306, declared by everyone other than our own Bureau of Meteorology, which has the La Nina status at watch rather than active, things are going to probably get worse. The interconnectedness of everything could see these Northern Hemisphere droughts rumble on. Toss in a belligerent use of gas supply by the surprise at the reaction to invading another country Russians, and the dropping water levels in dams and watersheds will rule out hydro as a replacement electricity supply for that gas. All this before we get to people unable to grow food due to droughts across Africa and Asia, and we toss in Ukraine's strangled grain exports, and the sum of human suffering appears to be on an upward exponential trajectory. Store some water where you are and use it to grow food. I'm not sure if anyone has done any modelling, I couldn't find any, on how widespread the food supply downturn is likely to be through this third La Nina event. It certainly looks to be affecting power generation as well as paving the way for more wildfires in places that haven't seen them in a considerable number of decades, if not centuries. It's a truly terrifying prospect. There's a kind of cognitive dissonance in preparing for both excessive rainfall and drought over the coming season. And it's unlikely to be both, but it could be. Shorten your supply line, find resources closer to home that don't rely upon long supply chains or sufficient water to power industries in faraway countries. Start by checking the labels in supermarkets. Know where your food originates and then start making more rational decisions. Somehow, cheap shipping and vile labour conditions probably. Californian oranges are cheaper than the Australian ones in Australia. Does my head in. Remember, as gardeners, we have some cards up our sleeves. We can create microclimates or make use of the ones around us, and a goodly use of these will allow us to grow much of our food needs if push comes to shove. I am definitely not a doomsday prepper type. Yet the last few years has shown that black swan events can and do pop up with some regularity. It doesn't seem unreasonable to have a safety net or a fallback position on hand. So, as I've said before, growing a multi species food garden may well be the most revolutionary thing we can do right now. It actually makes the world a better place. Certainly a world with better flavour. So let's all grow some food. If you'd like help, the No Dig Gardening course is now over at the Change Underground Academy. There's a new link in the show notes. And still currently selling for $17. Please tell your friends. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back next week.